Okay, so let's get into this. We've all seen history get, twisted for political reasons. But this is something else. This is taking a foundational document, something that's been core to policy for over a century, and just strategically repurposing it. It's a really complex and very controversial move.
It's incredibly precise.
So our mission for this deep dive is to look at this recent, very high-profile statement from the new papal figure, Leo XIV. He came out and tried to define the family, and only the family, as a stable connection between a man and a woman.
Right. But the key here is how he did it. He didn't just issue a new decree. He tried to argue it was already there, deep in the church's social tradition.
Which means, to really get what's going on, we have to go back, way back, over 130 years to the source he used, the 1891 encyclical Rerum Novarum.
Of New Things, written by his namesake, Leo XIII. And that document, well, its purpose was worlds away from defining who gets to be a family.
Exactly. So for you listening, we're going to unpack what Rerum Novarum was actually about, how Leo XIV performed this kind of surgical narrowing of its meaning, and why critics are now calling it Rerum Regressus.
The return of things. A step backward.
This is a major theological and political showdown. Let's get into the history.
Okay, so we have to ground ourselves in the late 19th century. Europe is in total upheaval.
The Industrial Revolution.
Yes, it's changed everything. Society is being reshaped, but not in a good way for most people. You have this intense social injustice. Society just split right down the middle into classes.
And the working class, the Arbeiter-innen, as they'd say, they're living in poverty, no rights, no dignity.
Absolutely. It was a powder keg. You had industrial liberalism on one side, basically prioritizing capital over people, and then radical socialism on the other, calling for revolution, for getting rid of all private property.
The whole system felt like it was about to break.
It was a crisis of state stability. So Pope Leo XIII steps in, and he sees these new things, Rerum Novarum, as a real danger.
So the encyclical, then, was his response to that crisis.
It was a crisis response, exactly. He was trying to find a third way, a Catholic social position that could, affirm the workers' dignity, but also support the state.
So it was really about social and economic justice.
That was the primary concern. I mean, the document goes on and on about the right to a fair wage, the freedom for a worker to spend that wage how they see fit.
It's about building a stable foundation, stopping society from just collapsing.
Precisely. And he really stressed the right to private property, said it is inherent to humanity. His argument was that if you get rid of private property, you're robbing the worker. You're taking the very thing they worked for.
So defending property was really a defense of the worker's future.
Yes. And this is where the idea of family comes in. Not as a moral ideal, but as an economic structure.
Okay, that's a crucial distinction.
It's treated structurally. Yeah. Leo XIII calls the family a true society with its own rights, older than the state itself. It was the vehicle for generational security.
So the just wage wasn't just for one person.
No, it had to be enough to support the whole family. Housing, food, education for the children. The family was the core stabilizing unit of the entire economy.
And what's so fascinating, and what the source material points out, is that the original text, it doesn't actually give a formal definition of family, not like we'd see today.
That is the absolute core of it. I mean, of course, he implicitly assumed a heterosexual model. It was the 19th century.
Right.
But that assumption was driven by economics, by property, by labor, by generational survival. It was an economic family model, not a moral judgment on love or relationship.
Okay, so that historical blueprint is essential. Now let's jump to the present.
And this is where the strategic part really kicks in.
Leo XIV arrives. And he seems to be consciously leveraging the name, right? Leo XIV after Leo XIII. It creates this sense of continuity.
It's a brilliant rhetorical move. It suggests this is all just an organic development of that great social justice tradition.
So the key moment happens May 16, 2025. He's addressing Vatican diplomats. High stakes. And this is where he makes his move.
He inserts his own very narrow definition of family directly into a quote from Rerum Novarum.
And we need to slow down here because the way he did it is everything. It's not just a quote.
It's a fusion, a composite quote.
He starts with his own words, defining family as based on the stable connection between a man and a woman, and then in the very same sentence, seamlessly transitions into Leo III's words about the family being a true society, older than any other community.
It's like taking a piece from a modern puzzle and forcing it into a 130-year-old one. By framing the sentence that way, he He grafts his modern exclusionary idea onto the historical text.
Imposing it.
He imposes it and then presents it as the single unified teaching of the Church on family.
And just like that, a document about economic justice for workers is transformed. It becomes this moral theological boundary to define who's in and who's out.
And he made sure everyone was watching.
Yeah, the staging of it, the Incinerung, it was meticulous. He invited the global press to an audience right before the speech.
So this wasn't going to be some background noise in a diplomatic meeting. He wanted global attention.
And the media, they did exactly what you'd expect.
They saw it immediately. The Boulevard papers, international outlets, they all pointed out the dialectic demarcation.
The line drawing.
The conscious, intentional line drawing. They highlighted that families with 2 men or 2 women or any other constellation, they were deliberately left out, excluded. And that pressure created the public discourse.
Yeah, the human cost of that became clear very fast. Critics called it an imposition. Some even called it queer bashing.
Because it just ignores the reality of modern families. You know, patchwork families, single parents, and especially rainbow families who are raising kids in loving, stable homes.
What about organizational responses, like from New Ways Ministry?
Francis de Bernardo, their director, he put out this powerful statement. He basically appealed directly to the new pope, reminding him of his predecessor.
The one who said, "Who am I to judge?"
Well, more like, who am I, if not a friend of LGBTQIA plus people? De Bernardo said this new statement felt like a betrayal, a step backward after so much progress. The feeling was, you know, the papacy should be building bridges, not walls.
Especially not walls based on a manipulated text. Which brings us to the core of the intellectual debate here. The argument that Leo XIV's reading is a historical bottleneck.
A bottleneck, yes. A needlessly narrow interpretation. Because if you look at how sociologists or child development experts define family today, it's about function.
Right. It's a stable unit where kids are raised and supported. The parents' makeup doesn't matter.
And if you read Rerum Novarum generously, it actually makes a case for inclusion.
Because it defined the family as a subsidiary solidarity unit.
Which is a fancy way of saying a self-sustaining support system. For Leo XIII, the important criteria were things like responsibility, contributing to the common good, mutual obligation.
Not gender.
Not gender. He was worried about stability, about this little true society being able to care for itself so the state didn't have to.
The source material really hammers this point. It notes that the original text mostly just says people. The word woman only appears twice in the whole thing.
Which suggests the original language was much more focused on the unit's financial and social function, not its gendered makeup.
And that idea of subsidiarity. That small communities should handle their own business before the state steps in. Rainbow families do that.
They absolutely do. They are stable, mutually supportive units. They demonstrate all the responsibility and resilience that Leo XIII was talking about.
So what about the part in the original text that mentions the father's duty to provide? How do critics handle that?
They argue that you have to read it in context for today. The father role is about who assumes parental responsibility. It's a functional role.
The person providing care and security.
Precisely. A role that can be filled by any 2 stable parents. Leo XIV is imposing a strict gender limit, where Leo XIII was just talking about a social function.
So this move has sparked this fierce threefold critique. Let's walk through those. It's theological, pastoral, and political.
Starting with the theological. The core idea is Christus central. The gospel is for everyone, especially those who are weary and burdened.
And that includes queer people who've been hurt by the church.
To start your papacy with an act of exclusion like this, critics say it just violates the essence of Christ's message. They point to Galatians, not more male nor female.
Paul breaking down binaries.
Exactly. Holding on to this rigid man and woman model is seen as Old Testament cultural casting, not New Testament theology. It's looking backward.
Okay, so that's the theological critique.
Right.
What about the pastoral one? This is about healing versus hurting.
Pastoral care, by its nature, should start from a place of suffering, not from some abstract ideal. Given the history of harm exclusion, conversion therapies, the first signal from a new pope should have been one of welcome.
And this wasn't that.
Critics call it a strategic misuse of the stage, using spiritual authority to stake out a conservative power position.
Identity politics with the incense stick, as the source puts it.
That's the one. It's prioritizing the institution over the people it's supposed to serve.
And finally, the church political critique. This feels like it's actively pushing against reform movements.
It's seen as completely counter-directional gegenläufig. It runs against the synodal processes in places like Germany and Belgium that are actively trying to integrate queer believers.
And what about the diplomatic angle? Making this speech in front of 100 diplomats.
It's a huge affront. Many of them represent countries with marriage for all, with anti-discrimination laws. To say this in front of them is to consciously disregard, well, reality, international development. It shows a cultural front line was being drawn on purpose.
So when we put it all together, what does this mean? Our deep dive seems to show that this new definition of family isn't some theological necessity from the 19th century.
No, it's a strategic modern choice. A conscious reversal of the generous social spirit of the original Rerum Novarum.
He took a social ethics document that was meant to help the poor and used it to set a moral dogmatic boundary for today. It's a choice that prioritizes a conservative institutional line over pastoral care, over inclusion.
And over the documented reality of loving families. And it was so targeted, he wasn't talking about single people or infertile couples. This was a statement of exclusion based purely on gender configuration.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to take with you. The source material brings up scientific studies from major bodies like the American Psychological Association that consistently show kids in rainbow families grow up just as well, sometimes even more stably, than in traditional structures.
The data is quite clear on that.
So if the Church's mission is to promote truth, justice, and peace, and if that truth has to be, people-friendly and based on reality, can this kind of institutional exclusion ever really be reconciled with the documented facts of human love and stability? It makes you ask, is this Rerum Regressus really serving a high ideal, or is it just failing to serve the people?